As is tradition, we like to acknowledge the first people, the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways in which we are on. Today we're on Camaragal lands. And we'd like to thank elders past and present for their continued wisdom and custodianships. And without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Professor Herb Marsh to introduce our speaker today.
Wonderful to be able to introduce Professor KT Hau, and from here on I'll call him KT because that's what I've called him for 40 years or so that we've known each other. KT started working with me at the very inception of the Self Center that eventually grew into what we have here now. So it's he's come and visited here before, but it's lovely to have him back. And I understand that he's in semi-retirement mode so that we might be able to see a little bit more of him. He's done an amazing amount of administrative work and still been an outstanding researcher. That's quite something. Pro-Vice Chancellor, Vice President of Chinese University, Hong Kong, Professor of Ed Psych, Director of the Hong Kong Institute of Educational Research, founding dean, the faculty of education, and an advisor on an unbelievable number of government and educational policies. Particularly important in relation to what he's talking about now is the role that he's had with PISA and TIMSS. So he's had administrative roles as member of international advisory and technical committees, both substantive and methodological orientation. He was an advisor to Hong Kong's participation in both TIMSS and PISA. He was leading an analysis of TIMSS and PISA data for policy formation. He organized workshops and capacity building programs. He was representative of Hong Kong in international education forums all over the world. So he's a very busy, well-traveled person. Now, today he's going to talk to us about some of his insights, knowledge and insights about TIMSS and PISA and some of the cross-national studies that many of us have looked at over the period of time. Thank you.
So thank you, Herb. We've been working like 35, 36 years. So there's only one message. I'm trying to sell you that in international comparison, we have a lot of these international studies. Comparison of means in league table is usually meaningless or carry less message than comparison of the slope. So what I'm trying to sell you, convince you, that probably we should compare slopes. So it's group difference between countries, then just comparison, just the comparison of the means. So we start with a lot of international study because if we study girls school, we can't draw any conclusion because what we found could be common to boys' school as well. So if we want to study girls, we have to find the boys. So similarly, if we want to study a certain country, you have to find another 50, 60 other countries to do the same research. But in all this research, it's common that after the race, we ask them to fill in a questionnaire. There are two main reasons of filling in a questionnaire. First is that we believe when we are assessing education, just the test score itself, like test score in math, test score in science, are not good enough. We should cover a lot of other domains. So we have to go beyond content. The second is that we want to explain the differences. So unless you have other background variables, unless you have other psychological construct, otherwise we can't draw any conclusion why a certain country is doing better than the others. And usually we build league table. So the most public concentration is on league table. Then back on the history, we start with writing with Herb. We sort of wrote the first article commenting on the usefulness of this questionnaire back in 2000 on their first wave of PISA data. And then we go on to publish a report
Oh, sorry. I've got, yep.
Okay. Then we publish a lot on the substantial results. So when we were both young, and then and before we retire, as Herbert described, I'm in the technical advisory. So there's a small group of 8 people deciding which model to use in the analysis, and then we have a questionnaire expert group deciding what kind of question to put in. And Herb doesn't like that because they are not including the SDQ in that. And they have a strategic development committee of deciding now the PSAT changed from a 3-year cycle to a 4-year cycle. So these are the things that discussed in different committee, and they're not happy with the questionnaire. So they set up a social emotional skill project, and I'm in that group. So they're trying to argue that what we are measuring with questionnaire are indirect measure. Self-report is not in that particular situation. So they want more authentic kind of measures, what they call direct measure on social emotional skills. So you just look at that and hope they can develop something more useful. And we'll see that actually with questionnaire, we have a lot of problems. And I'm also in Teams questionnaire. So I'm the only person in the world that looked at both the 2 largest questionnaire. And there are lots of substantial differences if you want me to compare. And then I'm managing the Hong Kong teams and Hong Kong visa. And then I've been to sort of look at Korean education system. Probably is the country which spend most time on after-school tutoring. And then education, they have a 2030 project. They have a second language project. I don't know whether you are aware of that. So that's comparing where Italian English is better than Korean English, kind of comparing the student. And then I'm also working with other projects in mainland China. And then we publish a lot with Herb on the piece of data. And recently, I also went to sort of work with the Brunei government. They're rich. So comparison, they are oil country. 95% of the income GDP is from oil. But there are lots of interesting results, which I will, if you want, I can share with you. For example, the student, I think, don't have extracurricular activities practically. So it's causing a lot of problems. Okay. And you see a lot of reports being generated. And then it also usually end up in big table like this, mean comparison of different countries. And this kind of skill is also applied to questionnaire. And what they argue is that in different countries, you can see the student reaching the basic mathematical proficiency. For example, they give you a percentage. So it's a mean, sort of a mean comparison of different countries. They do report slope, for example, in equity. Equity is the slope or the relation between SES and achievement. So they do report some slope. What I will show you is that these slope are usually more interesting. So these XY plots, the x-axis is actually the slope. The y-axis is the achievement score. So the further to my right-hand side is actually better. So country with a 0 slope between SES and achievement is the most equitable system in the world. So Hong Kong, Macau are doing quite good. Australia is sort of middle in terms of achievement, still quite good in terms of score, and quite on the good side if you use OECD average as the midpoint. So it's sort of quite equitable. But other countries, for example, the place that I visit, Brunei is here. So their score are low and the equity. In the old days, their equity is actually even worse. But there's one interesting thing. Indonesia is here. Their equity is better, but their score is also low. So you want a country, if you are the minister, you want to work in a country with better equity or weaker equity. So equity is not always good. Good is better. Because what that means is that in Indonesia, even the richest student in their country are still doing very poorly. So, but in Brunei, those richer students have way to improve their education. So it's not always that equity, the lower the better. Now, we go to the focus of our study. We look at 32 questionnaires. So these are the questions scales that they build a scales for. So we include all the scales in the PISA study that all students are supposed to. So you see all the things that you are familiar: perceived difficulty, teacher's feedback, stimulation, motivation, support, belongingness, and all these scale we saw in a lot of different researches. And then what we want to see, the first thing is that actually you calculate the between school and between country variance. So the between country variance is the most interesting part in most study. Other than SES, math, reading, and science, which are 25, 26%. So SES, math, reading, science, they have large between school variance, 20-some%, 30-some% between country, but for all other scales, actually, the between school variance is small, 5%, and the between country variance is another 5%, and 90% are within school. So what it means is that there's no difference. If you plot all the countries as a normal graph, actually all the country overlaps. The difference is tiny, and we all know that if there's no variance, there's nothing to explain, right? There's no difference. So if you want to explain the country differences in any of the questionnaire, actually there's nothing left behind for you to. The largest percent of variance are actually within school. So it is the textbook type, high motivation, high achievement, all these are happening within the country, within the school. So the first message is that there are little differences between country and between school differences within a school and within between school and between country. The second thing is that we compute free slope. So we compute free very. We want to be lazy. We don't want to compute all relations because they are difficult. I mean, there are a huge number of relations. So we focus on free slope. One is the SES slope. SES is the equity slope. So we want as low as possible relation between your questionnaire. So for joy in reading, love of math, you want high, low SES student have similar kind of love of math to enable a country. A country will have better equity if all their students have similar kind love of reading, love of everything, irrespective of their family background. So SES relation is usually an indicator of equity. So gender is similar. We want boys and girls to have similar love for everything. So missing classes, missing school, we want boys and girls to be similar. So they are very perform. So other than the mean, we want them to be similar within between the two gender. Achievement is a less studied thing. Achievement is that you hope if the school is running a good school with a good atmosphere, if you are measuring rates for school, then probably you think to be in the proper direction is that high achiever should have less rates for school. If they are motivation in study, you hope that the higher achievers should have higher motivation for school. Otherwise, the school culture may be, if they have zero relation, assuming there's no difference between high and low achievers in their motivation, then there must be something happening in the school that, for example, the teacher is punishing the student to force them work hard, then probably there's no difference in motivation between the high and low. So in order to have a good school culture, we believe that high achiever usually have the better desirable traits. So among all these traits, when you look at belongingness, we hope that your high-low comparison between the high-low achiever, you probably should find more positive, desirable traits among the high achievers. That's what we believe. So what we are seeing is that for math ability, there's large difference. I sort of exaggerate the difference. The large difference in the mean between school. Sorry, I use Chinese. I have several versions of this. I've forgotten. But within the country, within the school variation are relatively small. So in the sense, for achievement, for math ability, other test score, you see more difference, greater difference in the school. But for within for motivation and all those psychological skills, all schools are very similar. Remember, we talk about 5% of difference between school. So, but within each school, the difference are huge. So we have around 90% of the difference between the school. You put the two graphs together. So the difference is that for math ability, math, reading, science differences, there are around 20-some percentage, 30% of between school and between country differences. But for motivation and other questionnaire scale, we have around only 5% of difference between countries and between school is tiny. And if we calculate do free level calculation, so within a school, we can find the relation between variable and level 1, but we can also find the mean of the students within the school, and then we find the relation at level 2. Similarly, we can aggregate the school within the country and find the relation at level 3. So we'll look at this result. So what we're doing is multi-level kind of relation, but we try to find the level 1, level 2, and level 3 relation, which are usually plotted as graphs. So probably, I don't know how many of you are sort of aware of this kind of relation. If we find a relation between two subjects within the school, is almost 0.72. It's quite high because there are two cognitive scales. So when students are doing well in math, they are usually doing well in reading. And at the student level, if you ignore the school cluster, you sort of treat the 5,000 students within the country as one level, then the correlation is still very high. At the school level, because the reliability increased, so you are asking a question. Will a school doing well in math? Will that school be good in reading as well? So at that school level is 0.92. So in a sense, you can hardly find a school which is weak in math, but very strong in. If you plot all the 200 schools within the country, the relation average across all countries is very strong because the reliability actually improves a lot when you average out the school at the school level. At the country level, so we are asking, is there a country who is good in math but poor in reading? No. So the correlation is actually very, very high. So the implication is that we don't need another subject because we are in the strategic development group. We are asking, other than the the science, math, and reading, do we need a fourth subject like geography? Because environmental friendliness is important. So should we emphasize another subject? But actually, from the result, it told us that all these subjects are very, very strongly related. So if you plot the country, it's almost on one straight line at the country level. We also asked, how is the relation with SES? So average overall 80 countries is 0.16. So richer students in school do better in math. So it's 0.16. Another question is, will richer student in a richer school, richer student in the country, will they have a better math? The relation is 0.35. And then what I'm showing you is that at aggregated level, the relation to change because of reliability to change. And all three subjects look actually very similarly. Very similarly. So at the student level, it is 0.7 to 0.8, and then increase to the school level, and then it increase even higher at the country level, probably because the measurement error decreases. And do we need another subject? Probably no, because practically, irrespective of which subject you are measuring, all the country look very similarly in different subjects. But more intriguing is that we try to find, as I've said, we can calculate the correlation at L1, L2, and L3. So we calculate the blue is mean positive relation. So at level 1, we change all the scale in order that all these scales are positively related to achievement. So some scale, because like bullying is negatively related, so we recode the scale. And we make them all positive at level 1. And then level 2, you can see that a lot of them are still positive. But at level 3, actually, they change the direction in a lot of the scale, which means that a country, which is, for example, a country which is more resilient, the country mean score actually become lower. So at the country level, actually the direction changes. For example, general fear of failure. So within the school is like the textbook. So students who are academically stronger will have less fear of failure. So it's like what the textbook tell you. But at the school level, a school with more failure, actually, they are doing better. And then at the country level, country with greatest level of fear of failure actually is the best kind of thing. So what it is telling us is that the mean of correlation is not equal to the correlation of the mean. So we aggregate and that become the mean, and then we calculate the correlation of the means. So these two concepts are different concepts, and they can change direction in another level. And a lot of time we assume, for example, in motivation, in a lot of this motivational construct, we think that more interested in a certain thing, that country should perform better. Actually, it changed. And change the direction. Okay, then I also did a proper multi-level kind of analysis. I did two things. One is that I predict non-cognitive, I predict the self-concept. For example, I predict the motivation with the cognitive performance. So this is identical to the big fish little pond model that you predict a self-concept. For example, you predict the questionnaire with the academic. You're asking, will a country with higher mean in cognitive in the test score, will they be better in these questionnaire scales? So we hope they have positive related, but as Herb have found, at the school level, actually a lot of them may change direction. And at the country level, more change direction. And the other 3 columns, I'm predicting the cognitive with the questionnaire. You can see also that the relation at the 3rd level actually changed. And if you use the correlation, simple correlation, yes.
To clarify, the results at the school and country levels, I'm assuming they're not accounting for the individual level, they're just independent.
So for these 2 sets, so what I'm showing is 3 sets of analysis. For the first set is a multi-level analysis. Yes. So I'm using the level 2 school mean and the level 3 country mean to predict. And so the first 2 sets are a proper multi-level analysis. But this is just simple correlation at different levels. So what we see is that mostly same direction, but consider various factors. So we add on the second level, add on and find the second level. So the first set, the first 3 column actually is identical to Herb's big fish little pond effect model. But it's not astonishing. If we will look at the PISA report, you'll find this kind of relation. For example, within a school, we believe high satisfaction should positively related to high achievement. but you see this graph, but they are not often found in PISA, which are contradictory to general intuition. But this kind of graph have appeared in PISA report. For example, showing country with highest satisfaction, actually their achievement is low, the general trend. So what I'm showing is not very surprising to those who have been working with PISA data for a long time. So we do have this kind of negative relation at the government. So higher fear, for example, so those countries within the school level, the direction is different to this, but this is country broad. So at country level, we usually find the country mean of two things and then show them. But then if you find that that is exactly what I am showing in my third column, in my last three columns. These are the typical relation you use to plot the graph. And the graph will look like this. The third column, which changes direction. So countries with a higher fear of failure actually are performing better. So it's contradictory to textbook, what textbook, psychological textbook, exact textbook will tell you. So we try to give some graphical explanation. So the first thing is that even if this school, within each school, they're positive, but if we plot them, it can be. So I'm trying to argue that mathematically it's possible. So I'm showing one case. For this kind of relation, then mathematically, if you find the school mean first, and then find the relation, it can be mathematically. So this is not something contradictory to our mathematical interpretation. It can happen. And this I'm trying to show you another way of presenting the result. So assuming you have 5,000 students and they come from black boxes are the schools, so or are the countries. So we have many countries. You have 80 countries here. So if we plot the mean of the countries, so within each box, assuming each is country or is a school, within each box, assuming it's a country at the level 3, then all the relation if within this country, they are the same direction. They have no other interference. So all the 80 countries are under one cultural influence. If assuming they are all countries in one cultural influence, then you see the yellowish line and the dark dot, assuming the dark black line is the of all the data. And then the yellowish line is a relation within the country, with using the mean of the country, using a box. So the yellow line is a relation of the boxes. We find the mean first, and then find the relation of the boxes. Then these two lines will coincide. There's no contradiction. Assuming there's one culture, one. But assuming that in all countries, they have another effect, what actually is an extension or is similar to the big fish plan. So if your point, if your reference, if within the school, if they are using the whole world as a reference, then there won't be any big fish point. If they sit in a class and if they use the whole world as a reference, then they won't feel them they're different from other students. Then you are having this first graph. But within a school, if everyone use the school norm as the norm in making reference, then everyone will change their joy of reading towards the middle part, because within each they are shifting towards. So if you have a joy scale, everyone are shifting towards the middle part, assuming with each school are using their own school as the normal norm. Then all the different boxes will look like they're all put in the center of a scale. So another part which we haven't examined a lot is that assuming there's a culture, for example, high exam pressure, there are other things that happen in a culture that force all these boxes to move. For example, high pressure for high exam pressure will move all these boxes to different places. And then ultimately, if it can, or it will become a negative relation, then you'll find that the yellow line, which shows the relation between boxes, will become negative. So this part is of understudy. But one thing a lot of people talk about is that in all pieces, countries or economies, most of the high performing have a high stake examination at the end of the examination. So for example, for this kind of cultural thing that move all the means towards the negative part, then probably you see that the level 3 have changed. We also did some study classifying the variable into 2 clusters. One is that all these variables are strongly related among each other. The second is that these are more independently predicting, so they are not related to each other. So if you are if you want to analyze a cluster of variable, they are more strongly related cluster variable at L1, and these are unrelated to other things. So being bully is not strongly related to a lot of these variables. So actually, we can differentiate the construct. And this is my last slide. So what is the advice? So we know that there's small percentage of variance for questionnaire. So our focus today is on questionnaire. For questionnaire, there's more percentage of variance at country level. So hopefully the meaning of variable change and the frame of reference effect is strong. And so one in different means different thing. So what we are arguing, all students in the world study in one school and one country only. They never. So American student will assume that they are working very hard unless they see an Asian student. Right? So their reference is always within the school, within one country. So their scale are internally compared what we have shown. Many countries, if you have many countries, probably you can use multi-level, but you have the same kind of negative relation. If you have few countries, you use 2-level. So a lot of time we advocate that because we're not working with 80 countries. Because 80 countries usually are so diversified in background. Comparing 80 countries may not make sense. So usually you find countries which are more comparable, and then you have 10, 15 countries. So your interest will be 2-level kind of multi-level analysis. And so a lot of time you are more frequently using 2-level multi-level, and you compare the slope found in all these 15 countries across among each other, among the different countries. And you have a few countries, a few schools, then it's probably single level. In all the above, focus on comparing the slope. So I have tried to advocate free slope, SES slope, gender slope, and achievement slope. These are the easiest to find. And then most comparison of means at country level may not carry the same meaning. So what we see is that they may be misleading. And I strongly advocate the use of what they call informational and behavioral items. Informational, so they ask you, when do you go to bed? So information. So it's not your personal preference, or do you like, not that kind. Use information and behavior. So how many days? So you do not ask, do you exercise a lot? No, that's useless. You ask how many hours of exercise did you have every week? So you often have breakfast? No, that's not useful. Strongly agree this strong is way. So you use in 7 days of how often do you have breakfast? You ask this kind of question. Thank you.
Shall we open up for questions? Let's see. Why don't you go back to the slide where you showed the 2 groups of variables?
Correlation.
The reds and the blacks that was near the end.
These boxes,
No,
the explanation. This
one
one
of your last. It's the one.
just before it. Of this one.
You had 2 clusters of variables.
That's what it is, like that. Yeah.
This one.
Which one? This,
This one.
yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, But you went over that one a little quickly. Can you explain to me, what the.
So,
thing
so
is on the-
we have 31 variables.
Yeah.
So 31 variables is 31 times 32 divided by 2 kind of combinations. So we ask, how many are you correlated with others? So it's 31.
Can you put that back up? Sorry. Yeah, we're gonna say that. Could you make that big again, Ricky? We can see the variables. Okay.
So we are asking which so I calculate how many other variables among the 30 other variables you are correlated with. So some variables are correlated with a lot of others. Some variables are standing alone with of 2 or 3 variables that they are correlated with. So I try to differentiate variables that are very clustered and they explain similar things. Highly correlated variables.
And then what did you do with those 2 clusters?
So the implication is that if you are studying really school effect-free relation, probably a few of them are good enough because they are highly correlated. For second set, we can't argue that they're useless, but each of them work independently to others. If you want to include all of them, it's still good because they have their own contribution. They are not related to other variables. But for the top one, mastery, cooperation, they are really. So being bully, metacognition, they are different things. Discipline plan, I think the implication. Because what I'm playing around is that the relation among the construct with achievement, gender, and SES. So I can also.
What are the implications of that for the contextual effects that you're looking at?
So, of course, this probably, hopefully, will explain the cultural difference. For example, the thing that we talk about, that in some country, the exam pressure is extremely high. And in some country, it's collectivist culture that they treasure other things. But I think my experience working with this, because a lot of our students play around with this kind of relation and then interact with other variables. But oftentimes they are not strong enough to change the direction. So probably what we need may be more country kind of variable, but obtained from other sources, like those cross-cultural studies. They have other variable collected for these countries that probably they work. This may not be good enough to explain the reversal of the relation. Yes.
Other questions?
I have a basic question. About your 95 correlation between reading, math, science. We don't need a 4th course. But what about one that's not a subject that's not on the national exam? But what about like art? Something that's more creative. Like you don't need that 4th course. You can assume that what's high in reading in Hong Kong is they'll also be high in art or something like art.
So in PISA, so there are 3 core subjects which they examine every time, and they produce you, they give you scores of them every time. And then there are innovative domain. So in the most recent year, they have creative thinking. And the last one is global competence. And the coming round, they have digital learning in digital world. So all these are, we assume they're quite independent. But I think I'm not systematically tabulating them. But I think they are close to 0.6 each at the within school level. So students doing good in the 3 subjects is not 0.1 each kind of relation. So it's still very high. Of course, you can complain that probably the tests we are inventing are not good enough. They're still language loaded or academic loaded, that they're still not really outside the box and doing other things. So, but basically, I think the basic information I've looked through several ways, and that for the innovative domain, the relation is still very high, at least 0.6-ish at the country level, 0.7-ish. So country doing well in certain, although they have not taught creativity, for example, then they're still, in a sense, So there are always countries which drop a lot. For example, Hong Kong is very top 10% in academic, but then 30th% in creativity. So you still see a drop. But if you put all the 80, 60 countries, you can still see a very nice close to straight line kind of relation. So there's some drop, although you always complain, well, we are strong in one thing, but if you put in the 80 country perspective, then you are still close. So that's one thing. The second thing is that one sort of kind of experience we have found is that in the 2000, they introduced financial literacy, thinking that unless you teach students financial literacy, otherwise they cannot survive in the modern world, which needs financial knowledge. But they find out that students good in maths are good in financial literacy without teaching that. So for countries with a very systematic financial literacy syllabus, they do not necessarily do well in financial literacy. So these are the lessons learned. So what it's arguing is that so long as a country is working well in the teaching, they teach all kinds of things without your awareness.
You have an online question there from Sharon. So as in the last slide, if we apply ML for each country separately, will the slope coefficients be comparable across countries?
So we actually have, I can go back to my slide.
Okay, bear with me.
Let's do.
Let me move it for you, sorry. Which slide?
I think around up the 16th, yes. Still up further. 3 or 4 slides. I have 2 graphs. Yes, the next one. Hold on. The one up. Yes, this one. So actually we compare the slope, whether the slope make greater differences. So we find that among the 30-some scales, we compare the ICC between countries. So about half of them actually have greater ICC. The variance explained by the country when you look at the slope rather than looking at the mean. So it's not huge, but a lot of them they will have greater variation across country, but not in SES. So we have free slope, SES slope, gender slope, and achievement slope. SES slope is useless. You're comparing the equity of all this motivational scale and all this questionnaire across country. They look very similar. It won't help. But for gender slope, motivation, gender. So in some country, the gender relation between gender and motivation is very positive. For in some country is mildly. So the difference in the gender slope, in motivation, the achievement slope. So in some country, high achiever have much higher motivation, whereas in some country, high achiever don't have high motivation. So Asian, we are suspecting Asian may have a lower because they are drive to study by force, sort of, not by motivation. So the slope will give you more variation in achievement slope and in gender slope, but not that much in SES slope. So questionnaire are not sensitive to SES problem.
Questions here?
You're looking at slopes within a country. Have you if you take this notion of slope and look at it over time with multiple PISA data, then I think you've got some interesting different kinds of questions. I was wondering if you've focused on that a bit.
On the crossway. So cross cycle. So cross cycle using a country level, right?
Yeah.
But the most challenging thing is that across cycle, a lot of the questionnaire wouldn't match and will be changed. The best possible is that you have motivation in reading in one cycle, the next will be motivation in science. and the third will be motivated math. If you assume them to be equivalent, then probably you can still follow some of the scale. If you just use a label, but even if for achievement goals, the goals item change a lot of time. Even for bullying, the bullying item change all the time. But if you assume the construct is the same, then probably all these slopes can be compared, yes. And I think for the equity slope, if you look at the highest level, SES with achievement, they are more or less quite stable across the way. So I hope they can still for questionnaire. If we can find them, then it'll be interesting, yeah. To see whether motivation slope.
I know one of the things that we were looking at was the ICC of achievement, and looking at whether that went up and down over years, and able to show the consequences of that. The higher the ICC, the lower the average level of achievement, and if ICCs went up over time, then achievement went down, and vice versa.
I don't know whether it's related. Actually, in the 2020, they showed that all the high achievers, like Singapore and all those top performers, they achieved sort of reduced causal relation kind of words to describe is that they achieved that by having a small group of students who perform very outstanding. So at the sacrifice of low equity, they always. So country move up by having push them. So what we in China we call Deng Xiaoping the phenomenon. So what Deng has advocated is that let some people rich become richer first. So in some country they have a system. They have some school which can take in high ACS students and let them fly first. So there's Mr. Deng. So in our country, if you are really low, then the first thing you do, that's what I'm also telling the Brunei government. Actually, they have a lot of independent schools who are doing excellently in the country. So that's why Brunei is the top. If you cross out Singapore in the ASEAN country, it's the top among all ASEAN countries. They do it by having some independent school, which have high ACS students who did very well in the PISA. So I think one way to rescue some country is that you build in some independent school and let the rich people become better first. Probably that is the educational, I think the educational implication. But that's interesting to see whether, so Indonesia is very low because the SCS equity is bad. Bad in the sense that there's zero correlation. So you don't have rich people who are doing. So equity, in the old days, we always think that equity should be close to zero is best. But actually for low performing country, having zero is a weak for the country. If they don't have one good school to demonstrate good teaching. So in Singapore, they have a lot of rich students studying in high ACS school. That's why they're doing so well.
Jerry's just asked another question.
Do another several cycles. Do we do the resultant slope coefficient suggest with a review the change in SCS? But they're quite stable. For example, in a relative ranking, if we have several cycle Hong Kong data, at least for SCS slope, they are quite stable. Because SCS slope is the sort of the graph that they plot as the second kind of most important graph they show. So for that, in that graph, almost all the countries are probably in their position across many ways. So SCS slope, but for questionnaire slope, SCS questionnaire slope, I mean that the difference are small. So comparing SCS slope across country on the questionnaires, it won't help a lot if we are talking about questionnaire.
Any other questions?
Could you just explain the logic? Yeah, you're recommending to schools that if they're doing poorly on achievement, they specialize in a few independent schools to create the federal high performing schools. What's to lift up to get a national press towards higher achievement?
So we're talking three things. First is that if you look at Singapore, Singapore actually did that. They have a high a lot of high SES. That's why Singapore, surprisingly, it's very surprising that Singapore has a very low equity among the world, although it do excellently in academic achievement. One thing is that in I think the graph, the OECD graph, oh, that's the second one, the one, yes, 10, yes. And Singapore actually is here. So it's below the OECD average. So they're excellent in terms of academic performance. They are really poor because we would compare for large country, we expect there are peasants who are living in less advantageous area that remote school. So we can never compare Hong Kong City, Macau City with the country huge size because it's unfair. Because Hong Kong is just a city. We don't have poor people living in the villages. But for Singapore, we should expect Singapore to be much better. But Singapore, first is that they have a very high stake exam at primary 6. They allocate students to allocate at a very early stage to according to academic performance. But your family help you more at primary school level. SES relation with achievement is much higher in primary than in secondary. So Singapore high school students are advantaged by their family SES, and they go to better school, and that's why they equity. And also they have a very high performing school for rich students. So that's why they cluster. And so SES, so they can sort of sacrifice a bit because their achievement is very high. They can sacrifice a bit their achievement with gaining some sort of moving towards the equity end. They have that luxury because they are performing so well. But for other countries like Brunei, they have a lot of independent schools which are doing very well. That's why their achievement is better than the others. So your advice for Indonesia, if you have a chance to talk to them, then probably build some good independent school, expensive schools to show the good education, and then let other people. So this is the same as what Deng Xiaoping, the former head of China, they want some people in China to become rich first, to show demonstrate, and then they'll bring in the other better system.
Well, what's the logic of it? Like, so we need examples, we need role models. I don't get the logic.
You
We
have
have great schools, so everybody.
so Indonesia, even the richest student can't find a good school. So you are limiting their performance. They have good family support, they have everything, but the system still won't allow you to excel. You need good school, good education, unless your parents are really good, can substitute the school. We are guessing. There's no causal relation. We are just guessing. Talking about education.
Let me tell you my supposition, or maybe my biases. The more differentiated the school is, the school systems are in a country, the lower the average achievement. And that lower achievement is more a function of kids at the bottom and kids at the top. Kids at the top do well no matter what you do. And kids at the bottom will be hurt if the school system is more differentiated. Now, does that fit with what you're saying?
There's one, I'm not using my computer, but if you can look at the OECD graph, OECD have published like 100 graphs. They're publishing more graphs than before. In one of the graphs, they show the school achievement and the ICC kind of. So at the bottom end, actually low achievement. So our speculation is that assuming we have a ceiling effect and a floor effect, so the top performing country, they should have smaller differences because they are the top of the scale, smaller ICC. And the bottom, because of the floor effect, the differences will be smaller. And the middle one, the middle country should have the largest variation for the student performance. But actually, it's the different thing. It's like a straight line showing that the highest performing countries in general. So it's a graph put by PISA, OECD. They show that the highest performing country have the largest variation. So they show that. So the speculation is that they gain high score by pushing some students to be the best student. They allow some students to fly.
I think what you're saying is the opposite of what I'm saying. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we were able to also show was that within a given country, as the ICC changed,
You're talking about the change.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at 1 year.
I understand that, but the looking across time means it's a within country comparison. And it's a stronger comparison because you're controlling all
That
sorts of different.
you can see how you move up or down.
Yeah.
I think Phil did the paper, right?
Huh?
Phil.
Yeah.
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 It showed that like for a particular country, if your ICC decrease, then your performance increase.
Increase.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tricky, but
And
yes,
the data shows.
yes, good.
And the piece of data that shows that ICC is negatively related to country average achievement.
No, positive.
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 Yeah.
So the higher, all the high performing countries are sort of large within country variation. But anyway, that has a lot of educational minister kind of level implication, how you should improve your system. But for a few countries that I look at, for Singapore, for Brunei, is actually the large ICC. Probably you have to look where do these students come from, and so have the large variation and whether their equity is good. Because Singapore equity is not good, so the large variation come from the top SCS families. So probably that will have an implication. We have to control, and then probably will show, because just showing the ICC doesn't know where these high performance come from. Could they be coming from high SCS families, or do they come from low SCS families?
All right, well, thank you very much for that, KT, and I think
Thank
that's all. So on behalf of IBI, please round of applause for KT. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for those all of you coming online. So have a great afternoon. Thank you.